We are currently in the car headed to, well, where we're meeting Hank Harrison, and we're going to go talk to him about his book and about his daughter Courtney Love and his late son-in-law Kurt Cobain. If you wanted to get like a quick video looking around.
This is Love Kills, the assassination of Kurt Cobain. And the reason I want to show it on TV or, on the broadcast is because people don't believe it's actually out.
Mm-hmm.
They don't believe it's an actual book with actual pictures and actual text in it. See, so now I want to be able to prove it. That's that. The Dead book is about the Grateful Dead and the whole Haight-Ashbury phenomenon back there. A lot of rare pictures and stuff. That's volume 2. This is the modernized version of volume 1. The book's been out since 1976. And this is the first book in the trilogy of the Holy Grail, called The Cauldron and the Grail.
Yeah, I definitely see that icon you were talking about.
See, I use it in all
you
my...
were talking about the symbols having a lot of meaning.
They
Can
do.
you, talk us through what that would represent?
Well, Kurt was assassinated, okay? We think by someone close to him. So therefore, someone close enough to shoot him in the heart. Kurt is the swan. He is the king of rock and roll in his day. I think everybody agrees on that for his younger generation, you weren't even...
No, I wasn't even born, but I was...
But you have friends that...
My siblings were born in the 80s, so...
There you go.
Yeah.
So they know what was going on in 94. So it hurt a lot of people. A lot of people got depressed and sad. A lot of women got into this cutting thing because of it. A lot of people actually killed themselves because of it. And some of them, a lot of people say, no, they didn't kill themselves because of that. They killed themselves anyway. But they left notes that said, goodbye, Kurt. I'll be seeing you soon. And notes. They had notes that said it was Kurt Cobain.
Yeah.
That inspired them to kill themselves. So and I'm not saying there's a huge number of those, but there's a couple of hundred that we know about.
And for that specific case, for that to be the reason is crazy.
It's real crazy.
It's not good.
Crazy enough to write a book about it.
Yeah.
Right? No, there's a lot of books written about Cobain. Hundreds of books, or not that many, but there's probably dozens of books on Nirvana and how they came to fame and fortune and all that kind of stuff. But there's nobody writing books that are actually solving how Kurt died.
Yeah.
And this book solves completely, so that at the end of the book, what I do is I put people on the jury. It's like a small jury of people of 200, sort of like that new film, the new show that's on TV, where they have the crowd sourcing and they have the crowd decide where the bad guys are and stuff. Okay, well that's sort of what this is. This is a book about everybody getting on the bandwagon and reading the information and not accusing me or accusing my daughter or accusing anybody, just going through the book and gathering the facts. Took me 20 years to get him into a position where I could get into a configuration where I could gather them up and present them. And so now they're presented in a way that when you read it, you'll be able to make up your mind at the end of the book.
Yeah.
And are you pointing fingers at anybody in
No,
this?
see, that's what I'm trying to avoid.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because everybody says, well, you're Courtney's dad, so what right have you got to, well, I'm not saying anything that I'm not saying, in the book, I do not say Courtney did it. So don't expect that if you read the book. However, everybody knows where I'm coming from. And if you read the book, you'll know where I'm coming from. So
you throw out multiple options and kind of let people decide who they think.
Yeah, that's one thing. And the other side, the enemy people, the people that are the hater type people are saying, well, that was clever. You're still accusing your daughter, but you're moving around on it. And they're right. I had to skirt the whole issue because the only way I could get the real facts in this book out, the stuff I knew from the inside, stuff that nobody else knows about, was to avoid accusing my daughter of killing her husband. That's other people have done that already anyway. So there's absolutely no reason for me to go and try to capitalize on that.
Yeah.
what I'm doing is I'm writing and I have to sell the book for money because it costs us money to make it.
Yeah.
I produced the book myself, and I dug up the money to do it. So there's 5,000 copies available.
So where would you prefer people to buy this? This
Well,
book
right
that
now they can't buy it anywhere but directly through us.
Okay.
Okay,
We're
so
not-
on your website, you got a website?
No, we go Love Kills Book. Love Kills Book. 3 words all run together. lovekillsbook@gmail.com.
Okay.
Love
Okay,
Kills
so just
Book.
Email.
Yeah, and then all you got to do is send their email, and we get that, and then we bill them, invoice them. That way we get the name and address of everybody that's got the book. Nobody can stop us. Nobody can go in and intimidate Amazon. Nobody can call up a bookstore and say, hey, I'm Courtney's attorney, and you have to stop selling that book. The only way that Courtney can sue us is to go through me.
Wow.
Directly. I have total control of all the books, control of the distribution, control of the production, control of the spell checker, everything. We want to control some of that information and get it out to the right audiences, before we go completely nuts, without being sort of accused of exploiting Nirvana or my daughter or my granddaughter. We are a registered Archives is a registered publishing company. It's not some kind of self-publishing. We publish other stuff other than this. We have 2 horse books and another book coming out on Courtney's poetry, by the way, which she left with us, which she wrote long before she met Kurt. And some of the stuff that people are saying about her pisses me off too, because they're saying, she didn't write that, Kurt wrote that, or that proves, because the poetry she wrote in juvenile hall and sent me and gave me, and the poetry she wrote in Ireland when she was living with me, and the poetry she wrote when she lived on the houseboat in Sausalito with me, was all very, very astonishingly good stuff.
Yeah.
Bizarre, but astonishingly good for her age. She was 14, and she wrote poetry, publishable poetry at 14. So and some of it is a lot along the lines of some of Nirvana's lyrics, and you can sort of get a theme of who influenced who. I'm not saying Kurt didn't do his own work. What I'm saying is when they got married, when they met, they started merging information and ideas. Just like if you live with a boyfriend or a roommate, you're going to say, well, I'll wear my hair a little bit differently because I saw her do it, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's called transference in psychology. But to say that Kurt ripped her off that she ripped Kurt off is not necessarily true.
Sorry,
Let's get back to the backlash that you were talking about. So are you worried about like Courtney trying to, pursue some legal action to stop this? Or
Well, bring it on. What, yeah, a little bit. I am a little bit worried about it, but it's like, you're going to expect this. She has to realize that the book isn't really out to be harmful. There's all kinds of books out there, and she controls all of that. And so everybody that wants to do a book on Cobain or Nirvana or her or Frances Bean or anything like that, they have to go through Courtney, and that's a hell march. That's a march to the River Kwai right there.
Yeah, I don't think I can name a time when someone was really successful in getting rights from Courtney for anything.
Unless she controlled it.
Yeah.
In which case they were very successful.
Yeah. What's gonna
absolutely.
be a legacy?
As far as you said, all the books, no. This book particularly, yes. That I think it isn't so much my son-in-law, he's dead.
Yeah.
It's his legacy, number one, and actually number two, because number one is my granddaughter. Frances Bean Cobain has to know what's in this book before she can make her own mind what the hell went on. Because she's been told one version of what happened. She wasn't there. She wasn't in the room.
So Courtney's been influencing all of her opinions.
Brainwashed, total.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like all parents do to their kids.
Yeah.
I'm not faulting her for it. I'm saying that's what you do when you have a kid, and especially a kid that has all your money. The thing is that people think, the guy is not a writer, the guy is not an intellectual, the guy is an idiot, and because that's what Courtney spread around, and that's what all of her pals, and even Tom Grant, the detective that she hired back in the day, have you heard of him?
Yeah.
Yeah, He said bad things about me.
And
Well, I wasn't. The answer is there wasn't much communication. When Courtney, see, okay, let me start to answer your question this way. The phone rings. The book starts out this way. The phone rings, and I pick up the phone, and it's my lawyer, and my yoga instructor and my lawyer are on the phone together. And you're saying, "Hank, did you hear the news?" And I said, "What news?" Kurt shot himself. And I said, "What? No, man. Oh, that's right. She said he had a shotgun last time I talked to her." And then I hung up. And then my wife, Trina, called and said, "By the way, did you hear about Courtney? She heard it on the car radio." And I said, "Yeah, I just heard. Denny and Bob just called me." And she said, "She finally did it, huh?" And I said, "What? Don't you remember when she lived with us in Menlo Park? She used to go around the house and say, 'I'm going to kill myself a rock star.'" And we thought she was kidding, man.
Wow.
So when we heard that, we said, "Jesus, what the, you know?" And then I started saying, "Oh my God." We had no evidence whatsoever. We didn't know anything about it. I never met Kurt. She wouldn't let me go anywhere near the house. We were supposed to go up there for a Christmas vacation, meet the baby, all that stuff. No, she asked. My mom was 86 at the time. She promised my mom it never happened because Kurt was in the process of being murdered by somebody. Okay? So, and we didn't know that, of course, until after it happened. So at that point, I started looking and looking and looking. A month later, maybe 2 months later, Tom Grant comes along because he surfaces. He's been behind the scenes the whole time, but he didn't get any publicity until after he quit working for Courtney and released information to the public. And then finally, I hear about Tom Grant. Tom Grant gets interviewed on the TV and on the radio, and I said, "Oh, she hired a detective." And so the whole case starts to fall in. We were in the dark completely, except what we knew. Well, it turns out what we knew was a whole bunch of stuff that we didn't know we knew.
yeah.
Huh.
So I said, I better start listening to this guy. So we went on and got records, and we listened to Nirvana, and we listened to Bleach, and pre-Nirvana, Pen Cap Chew, and all those early records, and the bootlegs, and the ELPs, EPs,
EPs,
extended,
LPs.
yeah, and especially one that he did with William S. Burroughs, a poet, called "The Priest They Called Him," and other things that Kurt did. And we said, "This guy's pretty heavy, man. This guy's not a kid. This is a full-blown poet. This guy's the next Bob Dylan," I said to myself. And I started listening to his poetry, and I started listening to his music. And then I started listening to Dave Grohl and to Chris, and it's just a trio, and they're making all this noise, and I'm going, "Whoa, this is heavy." I was with the Grateful Dead. It took 30 people and 400 stacks of speakers to get the sound out. These guys are doing it, just 3 guys and a couple of side people. So I said, "That's pretty heavy." So I started listening. Now, at first, it's grunge, so at first, when you're an old rocker and an old jazz person and a classical person like me, you don't get it. But if you listen because your son-in-law is doing it, and you have to listen because you have to find out what's going on, you get it eventually. It makes sense, and then it starts to be good.
Yeah.
And I realize after, so I'm maybe the oldest grunge guy. It was just amazing when I made the breakthrough and I started listening to the music. So then I said, "Wait a minute. This heart-shaped box thing." Courtney used to send us stuff, and I used to send stuff, and she used to collect doll parts, and they were heart-shaped boxes and stuff. So I knew that there was some symbolism that was leaking into the two of them in their relationship.
So, as far as Courtney's music goes, you were talking about her poetry earlier. So, if you were a fan of her poetry, or maybe not a fan, but just knew that it was good, do you like her music?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Undeniably, yes. However, boy, it's awful dark.
Yeah.
It's really dark. There's some highlights to it, but it's profound and it's dark.
Yeah.
And she had a dark life, and there's a lot of things that happened to her that were dark. She didn't like to be without money. When I first got her out of juvenile hall, she said she didn't have any money at all. So I went up there and pulled her out of there, got a private plane. A buddy of mine had a private plane. We flew up there. She didn't like it because she wanted to go on Delta and go home, or Alaska and go home and run away. But I had her on the private plane. We went to San Francisco, and the first thing I did, the next day we went down and bought her some clothes. She had no clothes. And the mom had just abandoned her into Julie, you know. And she said, I said, Courtney, you know, what are you doing in this situation? You're a millionaire. You got all this money. She said, no, Mom says the money's gone. I said, no, it's not gone. I know it's not gone. She said, how do you know? I said, well, I was standing in an ice cream line because I used to manage the Grateful Dead, and I stand in the ice cream line, and this girl who's an old deadhead came up and said, hey, are you Courtney's dad? I said, yeah. She said, hey, guess what, man? I'm her banker. And I said, really? Does she have any money? She said, oh, yeah, she got a lot. I said, can you talk about it? No, I can't talk about it. I said, how much she got? She said, a lot. And all she said was, a lot. I said, okay, a lot. So I put Courtney on the plane, brought her down to San Francisco, trotted her into Wells Fargo on Market and Post. She went into the main Wells Fargo office, and I started to go in, and she said, no, you can't come in. So I sat outside on the marble bench. Half an hour later, Courtney comes out like this. I'm going, what was that? She said, I'm really rich. I says, yeah, I told you. She says, why didn't Mom give me the money? He says, well, because you fucked up, I guess, you know. But you should have some. You know, you can go to any college you want in the country, full ride, 100%, paid for, 5 years.
So
no
how
problem.
old was she when that happened?
She's, I would say, 15 and a half, 16.
Wow.
That would be crazy to find out that you have a ton of money at that age.
Well, it wasn't a ton, it was 3 tons.
Yeah. That's... yeah. And...
You want to know how she got that money? How my wife got, her mother got the money? The old man, my wife, Courtney's mother, was adopted. Her father was an Italian guy who was a lens grinder. In the Second World War, this goes way back, on the Second World War, Jack Reese got a contract from the U.S. government to do all the eyeglasses for all the sailors and the soldiers and Marines that were going out to Okinawa and Iwo Jima. You know,
Yeah.
and all the dead guys, they'd bring the glasses back and give them back to Jack. He'd recycle them, sell them again.
Wow.
He made $1 zillion, okay? And then he bought stock, and then after the war was over, they all got invested, and they joined the Bohemian Club, and they all got invested in, various, endeavors. And next thing you know, Jack has a chain of eyeglasses stores, high class, and it was called Ferrari and Arisi. And Milton Ferrari was a salesman in the front, and Jack was a lens grinder in back. But after a while, Jack just hired lens grinders, okay? But they were making a huge amount of money, massive money. But then when Dad died, when Jack Reese died, Linda got to inherit the money, and they didn't want to pay taxes on it, so they gave it to Courtney and put it in Courtney's name. Courtney was about 1 when Jack died. So that's where the money came from, and Courtney always thought she was rich. Once, unfortunately, I showed her how wealthy she was. When she went back she had to go back to juvie after the first trip down. She went back to juvenile hall and got in there, and then she started hiring girls for cigarettes to give her baths and clean up her bed for her and stuff like that. She became a little queen, you see, and she became a little princess all of a sudden. So that was my mistake. I should never have told her she was rich. That's my apology to the public from now on, is that I should have never told Courtney she was rich, because once she got that in her head, she ran with it. When Kurt died, there were people living in the house downstairs. People were coming in and out the front doors. It's all in the book here. You'll get to see who was there, what their situation was, who was available to do bad things, and who was available to do good things. Towards the end of the book, you'll see people died all over the place. It wasn't just Kurt. There was one woman that was downstairs in the house. She just went to Montana, and the next thing you know, she ODs. And she was clean, and she was running a rehab hospital, halfway house. She died. Jennifer Adamson. And then there's a woman that is very famous now, who's a famous writer, and she was there at the house, and they got her to get out of there either before or after Kurt died. I mean, we sort of got it down to Kurt died exactly 2:30 in the morning on Easter, on the day after Easter. Like, so it was a Monday, you know, the day after Easter morning at 12 in the morning, or Easter morning. It was in that 24-hour period there.
Yeah.
Pretty much sure that his body laid, that they gave him an overdose first and he died. And then they shot him to make it look like a suicide.
Yeah.
All overdoses at that time in Seattle were being investigated because they didn't know what the heck was going on. But if you had a shotgun, then it was okay. It was suicide. You didn't have to investigate it. So that's why they put the shotgun in the mix of things, because, but it was like 8 to 10 hours after he was dead that they shot him.
Yeah.
So with all these kind of suspicious circumstances, like, what would you say is the common factor in all these? I know you're not trying to point fingers.
Money, for one, and the people. There, you know, Courtney was one element, but there's other people involved in this who were benefited a lot by Kurt's death. But yeah, it's all in there. I'm not just plugging the book, but I can give you this much information: is that Kurt was murdered. There's no doubt about it. And we know pretty much who did it. At least we know within 85 to 90% who did it. And we know how it was done. We know who caused it to happen. We know why they did it. We knew, but the innocent people who were bowled over in the process are unfreaking believable. There's about 50 people just in the first tier of innocent people that got knocked over. And then there's a couple 100,000 people that were hurt and injured psychologically from his death, but I'm not even talking about Tom Grant's big on that. But I've only been able. There's not enough room. I have chapters that I wrote and threw away because the room is not available in a given book. The book would be that thick if I went through every case history of every suicide that killed themselves, that we can definitely attribute to Kurt's killing himself. But he didn't kill himself.
One that I found that was really suspicious, one case, was El Duce, whatever his name
Oh,
was.
wonderful. I love Duce, man.
So,
You think I'm a hippie? This guy is really a genuine asshole, beatnik hippie guy, you know. And I hung out with him. I got to meet him.
Yeah.
And I got to hang. Yeah, I met him in Chicago. I met him in San Bernardino. Very intelligent, funky guy. You know, real like almost trucker or dock worker kind of guy.
Yeah.
You know. Okay. Blue collar all the way, and he was blown away by this whole thing. What do you want to know about it? The fact that he died, the fact that he was thrown under a train. Yeah, gee. Turns out El Duce was the only guy that was see, first of all, let me start. I know we don't have time, but here's the deal.
it's all right.
Yeah, keep
If you go up to somebody in public and say, "Hey, Duce, I want you to blow my old man's head off," that's illegal. You can't do that. It's illegal. It's called solicitation of homicide. State of California, it's illegal. Federal, it's illegal. If you say, "Hey, Duce, I want you to fly up to Seattle across state lines and blow my old man's head off," that's a federal crime. Duce passed 2 lie detector tests from 2 different top-ranked lie detector guys, polygraph examiner. And he passed them. So somewhere along the line, Tom Grant and some other people, I think, were trying, they don't tell me, were trying to get Duce to testify under oath in court so they could bring charges against Courtney. Not for killing Kurt, but for soliciting a homicide in public.
Which pretty much implies.
Which, well, that's, yeah.
Yeah.
But she's still going to get 10 years if she gets found guilty, right? Week later, 2 weeks later, Duce's under the train.
Yeah.
I'm not saying Courtney did that. Obviously, she wasn't down there throwing him under the train. But somebody threw him under the train, and about 2 weeks after Duce went, about 2 weeks after Duce went under the train, the guy who we suspect of doing it shows up with a new Corvette and a few other little goodies.
So you think someone may have been paying him off to do that.
Somebody was paying the guy that threw him under the train to do it. Yeah, sure. And also in the lingua franca of Hollywood and the music industry down there, payoffs aren't necessarily cash. They're like, oh, you got a band? Do you want some gigs? You know, oh, you know, you're playing bars in San Bernardino. Oh, guess what? We'll put you on a 6-state tour. And you can front for, let's say, Metallica.
Yeah.
So now you're playing in front of an audience that's so big, and you get a 10% chip off of Metallica's gate. You're talking millions of dollars. And all you got to do is get up in the morning and get on the train, get on the plane, and go and play your gig. Yeah, so we were pretty sure that El Duce was, you know, people that knew him and knew how drunk he was and how he wasn't. They say he could stagger down the street stoned on a whole bottle of vodka and not skip a beat, and then go to the gig and play drums and sing and not skip a beat at the gig. He's a musician.
Yeah.
So people that knew him were surprised, and they knew what happened as soon as they found out he was dead. And there he is under the train. Well, actually, he didn't go under the train. He went up against the side of the train, and that killed him. The train was going 60. Train weighs 800 trillion tons, right?
Yeah.
Something going 60 miles an hour at that weight, it's going to kill you. For all we know, he was clubbed on the back of the head and with a shillelagh and thrown towards the train. I don't know exactly what happened. Nobody knows what happened.
Yeah.
Did they do an autopsy on him?
Well, they did, but they didn't report it. It wasn't reported because it was considered a drunken track walker falling across the track.
So kind of like Kurt's whole OD thing, like.
Kinda. Gee. Oh, kinda. Yeah, very kinda.
Yeah.
Yeah. But okay, there's 3 or 4 others of those too.
Wow.
And I can't go into them, but some of those are in the book too. People that have been killed or died or murdered in suspicious circumstances surrounding before and after Kurt died.
Yeah.
Because people in the music industry didn't want them to live anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a witchcraft thing down there. There's a lot of heavy. I may be a beatnik and a hippie, but I'm not a witchcraft. I'm not into the black satanic magic either, you know. So I really don't know what happened. No, I really don't know what happened. But boy, I tell you, when you get into logic and you start doing statistical analysis of things, we're talking 95%. We sort of know. I think it's enough to give a civil jury. Criminal says the thing is, everybody wants to reopen the case in a criminal case. I don't want the case reopened criminally. I want it open in a civil case. I want to get a bunch of people together and sue whoever did it in a class action lawsuit. So everybody gets like $1,000 or $2,000 and from somebody's estate, or for, you know, so that the people, not me, I don't want the money, but people who were traumatized by Kurt's death, mothers and fathers who lost children, mothers and fathers whose children are so traumatized to this day that they can hardly work or keep a job but are still alive, that kind of thing. Even if everybody got $1 as a reparation, it would scare the living crap out of Hollywood, out of Courtney, out of Courtney's people, all that stuff. The public, I think, needs to spank butt on this one. I don't think they're going to hang anybody. I really don't. I don't think anybody's going to do any time over it. But there's going to be some butt spanking, a lot like what OJ got, if you do a lawsuit. Anyway, this is all the people I'm thanking. There's a table of contents. It's a properly done book. Now, Memoria was one of Kurt's songs. And Leyland Lee Cobain, that's his grandpop. And that's my mom, Edith Velma Cook. Neither one of these people got to see their great-granddaughter before they died. There's a tragedy, if you like old people. If you revere older people who have done good in their lives and pay them back this way. Lee never got to meet Bean. That's messed up, man. If there was anything that made me more mad, me not meeting Bean's not important because I'm a hippie, right? But this old guy, he worked his ass off. All he wanted to do was meet his granddaughter, his great-granddaughter. Not his granddaughter, his great-granddaughter. You see what I'm saying? And then he kicked the bucket, and he was a sad guy. My mom was the same way. In November of '93, Courtney promised to have my mom up for Christmas to meet Bean, and Kurt died in '94. the following spring. So here are my grandchildren, including Francis, and I have another son, and he had 4 kids, so I have 5 grandchildren. So that's complicated there. So you guys, I'm going to cut it off here if you don't mind.
All right. Yeah. Well, thanks very much.